Hey, what's up, guys? My name's Todd Locke. I play keys and music direct for an artist named Lauren Daigle. So I want to answer some questions today on what it looks like to play in a live environment. The first question that we may ask ourselves is, what do I need in order to play live in terms of materials, equipment, etc.? I think the best thing that you can do when you approach this is to make it super simple. So like for me, I use this keyboard that's right behind me, and I have a little thing called a Korg Nano controller that I set up top, and that's where all my volumes are controlled from. So instead of, in a live environment, me reaching in 10 different directions, I just reach just to the top of my keyboard on that little Nano controller, and it has about 8 different faders, and I use those faders to control any volumes that I want in regards to keys, piano, pad, organ, different things that you want to add into a mix. So I would highly recommend just thinking about your setup and how you want to approach it, and obviously that depends on your environment. But you want to ask yourself, how can I make this simple for me? Because a lot of times when you're jumping into it, you can feel overwhelmed. And when I kind of started playing at my church when I was 15, I remember feeling like I was thrown into the deep end of the ocean. And you're just thrown into an environment that's new, and you're playing with a band, and maybe you're playing with a clique for the first time, and different musicians, and some musicians are better, and some need a little more practice, and maybe you're in somewhere in the middle in that spectrum. But there's just so many elements that you have to take in mind. So when you're looking with materials, you want to make it as simple as you can, and you want to make it easiest on you. So find a keyboard that you love, that you like the way that it plays, and figure out if you want to run it out MIDI or you want to use the sounds on the keyboard, and just make it super simple for you. The second question is, what is the best piece of advice you could give to anyone playing keys in a band setting? I think this does play into the vein of like what I was saying of keeping it simple. One of the best pieces of advice I've received is to think about a band as a kind of a sandwich, a sonic sandwich, and all the pieces of that sandwich need to fit together. So you need the bread, you need the cheese, you need the meat, you need the lettuce, the tomatoes, and maybe up top is the guitar, in the lettuce tomato region, and down below that is the bass and the drums, the meat of things. So if I'm playing keys, I want to wrap around what those guys are doing. And a lot of times with the guitar, it's doubling what the guitarist is doing on the piano and playing the same notes, not different notes, because I don't want to clash with him. I want everything to fit together in that sandwich and everything to have its place. What's really tough for a lot of keys players is they want to overthink things. Maybe they want to play too much, and it gets busy. And a lot of times when you're first learning piano or keyboard, playing more, especially with your left hand, helps you kind of keep a rhythm. So there's a temptation to really overdrive your left hand. Maybe you start playing chords in your left hand, which is not great unless it's just you. Because if I'm playing chords with my left hand, then guess what? I'm right on top of the bass, and a lot of times it just sounds super muddy. So we just want to think about a simple way to approach playing, especially in a live band environment. And one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten for that is just think about how everything fits together, and ask yourself, what is my place in regards to this specific Sunday or this specific event? Who is playing? What kind of music are we playing? How can I best wrap the keys around things? Because especially for me, if I finish playing and everybody says, man, that was awesome, that felt really good, then I've done my job. It's not necessarily something that sticks out, but it just makes everything feel nice, and it's kind of the glue that wraps around the bass and the guitar and those different instruments that just makes everything kind of mend together. So that's what how I approach advice on playing keys in a band setting. The next question is, how important is it to begin working with a metronome? I would say it's extremely important, and I actually have someone that I'm teaching right now in piano who's kind of just starting out with the click. And one of the things that I told her is, in the beginning, the click, when you're first starting to play with it, it seems like a major pain. And you're not wanting to follow it, and you feel like it's an annoyance to what you're doing. But the more you practice with it, if you can just turn it on even 5 minutes a day when you're kind of practicing through and learning songs, the better you'll be at keeping tempo in a live environment. One of the things that I still use is a little app on my iPhone, and I think it's just called METRONOME. It's free. You can download it, but it has a tap function. So if I'm going to learn a song for a live band environment, I can play the song and then I can tap along on my metronome app and figure out the tempo of the song. And then when I figure out the tempo, I can kind of chart out some stuff like the BPM, which is the tempo of the song, beats per minute, and then also maybe some of the chords. And as I'm playing the chords with the notations, I can figure out how the tempo is going to work because I got my metronome going. And then guess what? If we're playing on Sunday with the click, a lot of times, sometimes I know that people play with monitors, and that makes it a little more difficult. But if you're jumping into an environment where they're like, hey, I have a click track going, so you're hearing that click going, it makes a big difference to already be practicing and rehearsing with the metronome. The next question is, what are some helpful troubleshooting tips to remember before playing? And maybe we could ask ourselves the same question in a different way. What's a checklist we could compile beforehand? I think a lot of times it is making some sort of chord chart, because again, that helps you with your rhythm, playing with the metronome, and also it's kind of the premise of, if you've ever done this in school, where you've taken your own notes and you've studied for yourself, you're more likely to do better on the test than if someone gave you the actual questions, because you're finding out the information for yourself. And it's the same idea in a live band environment. When I'm approaching that, if I make my own chord chart and I figure out the chords myself, then I'm much more likely to remember and to know the songs. And then if I know the songs and I know the chords by memory, then guess what? I can just relax and enjoy where we're going and what we're doing and experience the moment, rather than being just glued to, oh, what are the chords here? Or I can't remember this part. If we chart it out beforehand, we're more likely to be able to enjoy playing. And after all, that's what music is about. I tell a lot of people when I teach that it's important to learn theory, and it's important to learn the different structures of how song melody, structure, and lyric stuff come together. But also, the last aspect is you have to keep playing songs that you love. So even if you're rehearsing something for a Sunday or a live event, you still need to play songs that you like hearing on the radio, or whatever it is, whatever genre you really enjoy and is really relaxing and keeps the hobby aspect of it alive, you need to still do. And so that's one thing that chord charts help us with, is it helps us just enjoy the music. So I would say that's a big number one thing. The other thing is just making sure your setup is super simple. Making sure your setup is simple, meaning like where you can find your way around sounds, because again, like we talked about before, if I go into a live environment and I'm reaching in 20 different directions to figure out the volume of something, then I'm not going to be doing as good of a job as if everything is in one place and I know what I'm doing and I've practiced it. And part of that is plugging up your gear beforehand. Whatever gear you decide to use, plug it up beforehand and test it out and make sure everything works, because you don't want to test it out for the first time in a live environment, or say, unfortunately a lot of people say this, of like, yeah, here's what we're going to do. I'm sure everything's going to work. I'm just going to plug it in when we get there. You have to go beforehand and kind of troubleshoot things so that you're best prepared. And lastly, with that, it's not only being prepared, but also when you're playing, keeping it simple. Like we talked about with the sandwich, just not stepping on any toes or getting in the way of other instruments. I mean, in a musical sense, so that you best gel with the band and that the sound of whatever the vision of what you're doing is most unified and just sounds huge. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope it's been helpful, and I look forward to doing some more of these videos in the future. Have a good day.